Do you guys remember last week when I talked about, well, I technically talked about a bunch of Final Fantasy stuff, but more specifically, my more popular of the three videos about the Final Fantasy XVI cells and how they have only resulted in about 3.5 million units, which even in that same video, it caught me off guard, and I said I had a really hard time accepting these numbers, and I don't know if they're 100% accurate. Well, guess what? They just came out with a statement. That article that this whole thing was based off of was retracted, an apology was made, there was a misunderstanding, and it turns out Final Fantasy XVI hasn't sold 3.5 million units. We don't know the exact number, but it's probably more than that. Which I think, you know what? That's probably a good thing, actually. And I apologize if I sound like I'm out of breath. I just saw this news and I was like literally in the middle of doing a bike ride, and then I saw this and I had to run upstairs and grab my phone so I could do this recording. So if I take a lot of breaths, I'm sorry. I'm very out of shape and bike rides kick my butt. But yes, Final Fantasy XVI, not 3.5 million. It's probably higher than that. And if I had to give a guesstimate on which number it probably is going to fall upon, I would say, if I had to take a guess, that Final Fantasy XVI is probably around the 5 to 6 million, probably like a 5.5 million units sold at this point. I mean, when you consider that within the first week or two, whatever it was, that Final Fantasy XVI shipped 3 million units, it really is, when you just think about that, hard to accept that over the next 2 years that this game would only sell another 500,000 copies. But if you also remember in that same video that I talked about this from last week, I also said that even if the number was doubled, that if Final Fantasy XVI had sold 7 million units, it would still be considered a disappointment probably for Square Enix, because they spent so much money on this particular game. And that's kind of the issue we're still going to have until Square Enix themselves actually releases what the number is. Final Fantasy XVI is a big budget game, and it had a very big budget. Suffice it to say, 7 million units probably wasn't enough. I fully do expect Square Enix themselves to have expected this game to have been up to the 10 to 15 million units as their goal, because right now, as it stands, even though we don't know the numbers, even if you were to round it up to about 7 million units, it wouldn't even be in the top 10 selling Final Fantasies of all time. So that just gives you an idea of how lacking the sales are for Final Fantasy XVI, and I don't know why Square Enix isn't sharing those numbers, unless of course they're really, really bad, and 3.5 million, that would be really, really bad. Thankfully, though, it's probably something higher than that, but I don't think it's going to be much higher than that because they're still not really willing to share those numbers. But I kind of want to know now. I want to get an idea of just how many units exactly this game sold. And sales units, by the way, aren't the end-all be-all, and sales definitely don't reflect whether or not a game is quote-unquote good or not. That's not what this video is about. This video is just because I simply love to analyze data, and I like to see the sales numbers, and then I try to come up with my own opinions and theories as to why a particular game did not sell. Because if you look at Final Fantasy XVI, for example, I said in the last video that there's probably this huge split in the fan base, and even in my comments and even in my likes and dislikes on that video, what am I at? I think last time I saw it was like 3 likes versus 5 dislikes, and there's a lot of people that said I didn't want to play Final Fantasy XVI because I wanted a more traditional Final Fantasy. I also saw comments in there below talking about how the last great Final Fantasy was Final Fantasy X. Respectfully disagree, but yes, Final Fantasy X is an amazing video game. I mean, heck, at the end of my videos, I say praise be to Yevon, am I right? So there's definitely a lot of discourse and definitely a lot of mixed opinions on what people want from a Final Fantasy game. And that's probably led to the lack of sales from this franchise. Now, the good thing is, though, is if there are more sales for Final Fantasy XVI, it can give Square Enix a better look at things and be able to decide what they need to do to improve the action system going forward, or if they want to maybe next time try, let's say, Final Fantasy IX Remake and make it more traditional, make it turn-based, and see those sales numbers, and then kind of have a comparison. They can look at Final Fantasy IX's remake sales numbers versus Final Fantasy VII Rebirths versus Final Fantasy XVI's, and that would give them a better idea of what the fans actually want, because I honestly don't think Square Enix is 100% certain about any of it. I don't think they know, so I do think the sales numbers will at least give them an idea of what the fans want, which, even like I said in my comments, maybe the fans, maybe we don't know exactly what we want at the end of the day either. At least as a community. We like it all, right? Maybe, not quite. But there you go, the Final Fantasy XVI sales number fiasco is officially retracted. And like I said, I think it's probably for the best. Definitely journalists and news articles and stuff, they don't want to be inaccurate, and when things like that do pop up, you better believe I'm going to jump back on here and recorrect my own statements and my own thoughts and my own feelings about this. I'm glad those numbers aren't true at this point, but I do want to see what they are. I really would like to see what Final Fantasy XVI numbers are down the road. Maybe we'll get them, maybe we won't. But at the end of the day, I'm going to pass the question off to you guys. What do you think about this whole thing? Now that you know that the sales numbers are no longer valid, so to speak, does this change your opinion about any of this? Why or why not? Let me know down in the comments. And as always, thank you so much for watching this. I am Bradley Overrated, out like a trout. Praise be to Yavin, Final Fantasy X, baby! And I'll see you on the next one. Take care.